We have a strong tendency today to overestimate our abilities, right? 90% of us think that we're above average. That math does not work out.
I'm telling you, I'm never wrong.
I think we need way more people saying, I just don't know. In a confusing world, in short, what we need is intellectual humility. The world forces us into extremes, and our algorithms are geared towards this, right? It doesn't reward the thoughtful, careful, nuanced takes. It rewards the extreme ones. It rewards the hot takes. Now, I try to be thoughtful and nuanced on this channel. And so if you see the value in that, then please subscribe. I really appreciate the support. But let's talk about the importance of intellectual humility and the ability to say, I don't know. The title of this video comes from an Alvin Plantinga quote where he said, most of us form estimates of our intelligence, wisdom, and moral fiber that are considerably higher than an objective estimate would warrant. No doubt 90% of us think ourselves well above average along these lines. Now, I think that's pretty clever, of course, because again, that math just doesn't work. 90% of us cannot be above average.
You're incredible in math.
But I do think that there's something to this, that we often overestimate our abilities. We often overestimate how right we are. Now, extremes are almost always problematic. We can take almost any good thing and overdo it, right? We can be too confident. We can be too friendly. We can be too bold. We can be too frugal, too spontaneous, too patient, too loyal, too independent, too passionate. There's more, too competitive, too tolerant, too optimistic, too ambitious, too prepared, too skeptical, too open-minded, and too agreeable. Just think of any good character trait, and if you overdo it, it becomes bad. For Aristotle, this is just the nature of virtue itself. The virtue is always the middle way, right? Where you don't overdo it or have the excess, but you don't also underdo it and have the deficiency. The virtue is right there in the middle. Take generosity as an example, right? You want to give to people, you want to share what you have and be generous. So if you hoarded everything, right, this is the deficiency, and didn't give anything away, then that's a vice.
It's mine, all mine.
But if you gave everything away, that seems to be a vice too. That's the excess, right? Because now you're destitute and now you're going to be dependent upon others. Or take courage, for example, maybe courage as you go into battle. Now, you should be courageous. So obviously, if you're cowering in fear, back at the barracks or whatever, then you're not exercising the virtue. But if you rush out onto the field, this is a kind of excess, right? And you don't bring your weapon, you don't bring your armor. I'm not sure why we're in like medieval battle here, but anyway, you get the idea, right? If we rush, that's just rash. That's just crazy. The virtue is to go to battle, but do it with preparation and strategy, right? Without overdoing this. That's where courage is found. So for Aristotle, it's always the middle way. It's avoiding the extremes and sort of finding that balance in the middle. That's the way of virtue. And you'll be shocked at how much this holds true in life. We want to avoid the extremes. And I think especially when it comes to intellectual humility. The middle way is the way of intellectual humility, where we, of course, hold our views with confidence, but we also recognize our limitations and also recognize the possibility that we could be wrong. And I really mean it. I think we need to find confidence in our views. And that's really a lot of what this channel is about, is thinking about some of the big questions of life and holding our views rationally. We don't want to be wishy-washy in everything. That's not the intellectual virtue, right? That's the kind of deficiency. But here's the thing, saying I don't know kind of often, at least from time to time, that's not necessarily to be wishy-washy. We want to say I don't know when We don't know. And I just don't see this a lot in our public dialogue. What I see so much is overconfidence and extreme hot takes. And I want to suggest that's an intellectual vice as well. So look, I think the reality is that a lot of life is just really complicated. I mean, politics, for example, is this very complicated thing. You have to know a lot of things about a lot of things, right? And the reality is many of us don't. Many of us don't know that much about a situation, but for whatever reason, that doesn't seem to hurt our confidence in proclaiming those things. People weigh in as if they just know the situation from top to bottom and it's just obvious, but so very often it's not. Theology and philosophy are ridiculously complicated. Right? Now, there's some big picture things that I think you can be clear on and know, but to really say a lot about those things in their depths takes an extraordinary amount of effort and nuance. I think this is why the new atheist movement really kind of fizzled and just went away as a movement. The question I often got is, what's new about the new atheist movement? And the answer was just that instead of just saying that theism is false, right, the belief that God exists is false, the new atheists thought it was delusional and that it shouldn't be taken seriously. And many of us were involved in debate after debate where the new atheist would demand evidence in some way, the theist would lay out the evidence. They would just sort of dismiss it or hand wave it away and then say, where's your evidence? Now, let me be clear. That's not just a problem for atheists. There's plenty of theists, plenty of Christians, in fact, that are very dismissive to any challenges that come along. So we all are guilty of being dismissive and overly confident in our views. We're all guilty of lacking intellectual humility. Let me give you what I think is the mistake here. If we take what we know and believe and see it at three different levels, right? Level one, let's call that our fundamentals. These are the things that we take ourselves to know. We take these to be knowledge for us. In fact, it's these things by which we sort of measure the world. It's how we understand the world. These are our fundamentals. Now, it's not to say you couldn't change your mind on a fundamental, but you likely won't. It would take a lot, and probably it would really rock your world in a way. It would sort of flip everything on its ear, because this is how you understand the world to be. These are your fundamentals that you're not likely to give up. Okay, then we have our areas of expertise. What I'm calling our areas of expertise are these areas that we've looked into, that we're pretty informed on, right? Now, we're in process, but we have gone down that rabbit hole. We've formed some views on the basis of reasons. You're something of an expert on these things. Now, I don't mean that you're literally, have a PhD in these areas and you've published in these areas necessarily. It's just to say, like, this is an area of expertise. It's an area of experience for you. You could genuinely weigh in, walk your way through the issues, and show why you believe what you believe. Now, the problem is when we take these areas of expertise and act like they are our fundamentals. We act like this is just the way the world is, as if this is just obvious, and that there's no way we can be talked out of these views. But you're just wrong. Right? An area of expertise, doesn't matter how much of an expert you are, you still might be wrong, and you should have the intellectual humility to recognize that. Again, what I think that people really miss is that you can be confident without being overconfident. You can be confident while still being intellectually humble, wanting to hear opposing views, see what they have to say, even if it doesn't change your mind. Okay, and then third is that it's just the rest of our beliefs. So these are things that we believe about the world, but we might not be so informed, right? Certainly not coming from expertise. Now, these beliefs we need to hold loosely. Again, we probably make the mistake of take the rest of what our beliefs are and act like we're experts. So hold it loosely. I'm not saying don't hold it. We're going to still have beliefs, so you just can't be an expert on everything. But we want to go to the experts to evaluate how good of a belief it is. And here is where we say, I don't know. And we're going to have to say that a lot. Now, why should we be intellectually humble? Well, I think the primary reason is because it leads us to truth. I mean, quite ironically, if we're not intellectually humble, it actually raises the likelihood that we believe falsely. I mean, just think about it, right? So if you're dismissing someone's view without really giving it a fair evaluation, what if you're dismissing a view that's true? And what if your view is false, but you're just assuming it's true, right? And don't have the intellectual humility to consider whether or not it's true or false. Well, of course, you're going to be in bad shape then. Again, it's quite the irony that being aware of our limitations and the possibility of our being wrong, that actually leads us to truth. Now, studies also show that there are all kinds of benefits to being intellectually humble. It actually makes you a better decision maker because you're not locked into one thing. It actually has a likability factor.
It's essential to be likable.
People like someone that's not going to just dismiss their view after all, right, and consider what they have to say. People like being heard. And it can even lead to a greater well-being. I mean, obviously, right, because you're aware of your limitations. And if you're being led to truth, then that's going to, of course, lead to greater well-being as well. So as much as the hot takes grab attention, they're just not all that helpful. They're just really kind of easy, but they don't lead us to truth. They lead us to the extremes. But the virtue will always be in the nuanced and thoughtful middle way.